Party with your host, Dustin Rybka.
Hello, welcome to Sex Party. I'm your host, Dustin Rybka. With me on the show this week is friend of mine, friend of the show, Christin Henke. Christin, you may remember her from all the way back in episode 20. It's been a long time. She's finally back. She is a sex coach. She's a sex educator. She is a sexual person. And we're going to talk about what happens when you're a sexual person, you're a horny person, you're an explorative person, and you become a mother and you move to the suburbs, right? How does your life change? Where does that sexuality, where does that horniness go? Is everyone in the neighborhood turning to you to try to find out how they could spice things up in their marriage? Do they all assume that you're going to pull them into some twisted threesome? Christin also talks for the very first time about her bisexuality and having feelings for women and being in a straight-facing heterosexual relationship. It's an amazing episode. Christin is lovely. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Christin Henke.
This week's conversation.
Christin Henke, welcome back to Sex Party. It's always a lovely, lovely day, lovely episode when I get to say that, but especially when I get to say it to you because you are one of the OGs on Sex Party. You were one of my first guests. You were episode 20. You also, and we'll get to all this, guys, just settle down. But you were also, you played an integral role in the relationship I'm in now. And it's amazing to see you again. How are you?
Oh my God. It's so good to be back. I always feel like to be invited once is a vote of confidence. Like this person doesn't know you. They're taking a risk on reaching out to you. Honestly, we're desperate. We need guests. Like in the beginning, it's all very like, God, I hope this works out. And then the next time though is intentional. So I think it's a much higher compliment to be asked on a second time versus the first. So I am so grateful to be here. I am honored that you wanted to have me back to talk, to catch up. It gives me so many warm fuzzies and sparkly feelings knowing that you and Gianna are doing well and that our onion peeling we did together several years ago was supportive of that. How beautiful. Yeah, feels fucking good to be back, friend.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, I would have had you back 3 more times by now, but you've been very, very busy. So at one point I'm like, I'll just try to reach back or whatever. And so here we are. And I think, you know, you feel very integral to that time in my life, which feels like yesterday, but it was not yesterday. It was fucking 2 years ago or some crazy shit. And so let's just say nobody listened to any episode I've done before episode 100. Let's just say that someone was in some sort of like, juggling accident, right? They hit their head very hard. They don't know who you are. They've been in a coma. They haven't seen the episode. Could you talk to the audience a little bit? Just we'll do a little refresh. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. I hope no one had to go into a coma to get here today. But happy to give you a refresh or a first time introduction. My name is Christin Henke. Though if you're in the South, they pronounce it hanky, and we just run with it. Hashtag hanky panky all the way. I am a sex educator and coach, and also a somatic experiencing practitioner. So that's a body-based therapeutic modality that is utilized in the processing and renegotiation of trauma. It's a bottom-up approach. And yeah, I've been combining the two for several years now. Started out in the sex coaching industry, realized very quickly as clients were coming in and wanting to give flashier blowjobs and spice up their relationship and all of these wonderful things that we all want to do, hope to do. And being given, the tangible tools to do that, and then coming back to me and saying, I don't know why, but when I tried to do this, I froze, or something happened, or I had a reaction that I didn't expect. And 12 sessions later, it was like, oh, when I was 15, this happened and I never told anyone, or, so on and so forth. And so I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be able to empower people to embody their authentic selves and sexuality and sexual expression if I wasn't equipped to help them handle their underlying trauma. Because the number one thing that we need to experience a robust and liberated sexual experience is safety in the world, safety in our body, safety in our relationships. And we can't do that if we have unhealed, unprocessed trauma. So that's the blip.
No, I love all that. And now I have my scalpel out. We're going to go back in for a second. One, a flashier blowjob. I mean, that can mean so many different things. And I feel like flashy blowjobs are important. Okay. Yeah. And so
flashy just means wet, guys.
Right. Like the gaggy, spitty, slutty kind of whatever.
Dude, putting lube in your mouth. People don't realize you can do that. That is like one of the best tricks you could ever learn. And that is also why it's important to have toxic-free lubricant, everybody. Lots of great brands. I can give those recommendations for the notes. But yeah, flavored, unflavored, as long as it won't kill you, pump a bunch of that in your mouth. And that is going to help out a lot, give you a lot to look at with your hands. Like, that's, pro tip.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even 5 minutes in, guys, and she just gave a fucking
axis has been reached.
Yeah, you just Michael Jordan to sex tip. I was like in the first 5 minutes, like putting lube in your mouth. Are you fucking kidding me? Where that's getting clipped for sure. Yeah. Nice work.
You have had industry professionals on this podcast. So
yeah,
if they're not talking about putting lube in your mouth, then I'm a little disappointed. But
yeah, no. I think it just speaks to your zone of genius for sure, which is like super wide and encompasses so many different things. The other part of it is I have such a respect for, and I don't completely understand it, but somatic practices, they always seem like they seem very like hardcore, like screaming, right? That's somatic. Like somatic birth is probably like the fucking hardest thing, whatever. And you've been through something like that. And like somatic breathing, it's like very intense. So it's a lot. And I think people don't realize that sometimes that they're already embodying stuff like that. If they're walking in the woods, like, like welcome to somatic practices. So that's very cool too.
I think you raise a really interesting point though. And for anyone who is just now hearing the word somatic, or like Dustin is saying, somatic has been thrown in front of everything. Like, this is somatic practice. This is how you somatic this. This is how you, somatic is a fancy word for body. So yes, anything that has to do with your body is what we're talking about. And I think there are a lot of different ways in which to engage the body in healing and expression in, lots of different things. And I think all the ones you mentioned and the ones people think of often are very sympathetic in terms of like nervous system, like yelling and screaming and expressing rage and doing anger, all those kinds of things. But a lot of what I do in the body is creating or helping people create the capacity to tolerate more slowness and things that are more parasympathetic in nature. So being able to sit with something uncomfortable instead of running to do something or turning to our coping and adaptation things, or feeling that overwhelming sense of rage. And instead of needing to run into the forest screaming, which may actually be needed at some point, to be fair, but also perhaps what it's like to expand the capacity in our body, the space in our body and in our nervous system to feel that rage and not be overwhelmed by it. Because so often these really strong feelings and emotions and reactions that come up, their self-protection, our physiological self is coming forward to protect us. And it's because we don't know any other way. And so that's often, I'm a side tangent, but often that will turn into running away, fights, these fight and flight is very much what comes up with that sympathetic kind of reaction. And so building the tolerance for the rest and digest, for being able to sit and process, for being able to feel something without that like crippling fear coming in. that the grief, the shame, the anger, whatever is boiling around in our guts is going to overtake us and actually kill us. Like that's the physiological threat, is feeling something so strongly that we're afraid it's going to wipe us out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I like about you is you do take this, I don't know, but I mean, I guess I would call, so in my, dumb American fucking white man brain, I guess I would sort of classify somatic as like, for some people, probably like a little woo woo, right?
Yeah.
So like, I love that you take the woo woo piece of it, but then you also like hybrid it with like flashy blow, like, hey, I'm just here to learn how to give a flashy blow job, and you're like, okay, well, somatically, and and then put lube in your mouth and whatever.
Totally.
And
You're
so,
like, let's address your trauma so you don't freeze when you go to give flashy blowjob, and then let's give the best flashy blowjob of all time, right?
Right. Yeah, and that kind of stuff, it does. I mean, it does really help relationships when people can connect emotionally, but also sexually. So you're kind of hitting both of those. And I absolutely love that. I mean, when people come to you, like and just at like a basic level, I mean, unless there are like a lot of people coming to you for more like hardcore, like, oh my God, these huge problems. Like, are people coming to you and saying, I feel, just a little bit like this, but then you kind of get into it and it turns out to be this huge other thing. And so then those people find themselves like really adopting more of a somatic, approach to not just whatever they came to you for, but then other things too.
Yeah. I think one of the primary things that has changed since the last time we spoke, between now and then, or then and now, is that back then people were coming to me saying, I want to be more of this. I want to be better at this. And all of it was in the realm of sexuality, because obviously that's my main shtick. Like that's the lens that I work through. And the reason that I work through the lens of sex and relationships is because sex actually touches everything, right? Like I forget who said it, but there's a famous quote that's like, however you fuck is basically how you do everything else, like that. And that is it's so true. Everything that happens outside of the bedroom is in one way or another influencing what goes on in the bedroom. So what is or isn't happening in the bedroom is a symptom of all the other shit. So they can come to me through the door of flashy blowjobs, want to feel more empowered in my body, want to sense or feel desire more, want to work on, libido differences, all these things. And we're going to get to anything that is touching and contributing to those symptoms.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that concisely answers the question, but I think now people, because I've been doing that, and I've been in private practice for 5 years, and so word gets around, and I've been very fortunate that I've had a lot of like word of mouth referrals after working with so many folks. And so now people come with a greater awareness where it's like, hey, I have this big thing that I've never worked through, never processed. I don't know how it's impacting all this other stuff, but I know it's impacting me. Will you help? And that's kind of where the relationship starts now. But I do think very often people come in with a specific goal in mind and are still surprised every time we end up touching all the other things that this links to.
Yeah, I mean, what a gorgeous answer, and thanks for that, because you just went right to it as you do, which is great. But yeah, I mean, sex does that. I mean, the reason the show is called Sex Party, I haven't even fucking given this tangent speech in a long time, but we'll give the short version. Is that sex is just a fucking umbrella, you know what I mean? And I can selfishly talk about anything I want on this show because it all has to do with sex. The reason I'm sitting in this chair, obviously, let's dumb it down, right? Duh.
You've had sex in this chair.
Oral. Yeah.
There's some really good, like deep penetration seated situations.
Well, this has like handles on it, and they don't fall. If they would fold down, we'd be good to go. But I feel like her legs wouldn't be able to. It would be like me, like arched up, and it would just not be comfortable.
Ideal sex chair. All right.
Yeah. The one behind me,
or the sex throne.
Yeah, the one behind me is way better for sex. So I will say that.
Interrupted you.
No. But yeah, I mean, I think that so you're right. Sex does touch everything, and so it's important to tune into everything that it's trying to communicate to you. Because most people are just like, I gotta bust my nut and go to work, or whatever. And it's like, you could do that. And I get that. I gotta bust my nut and go to work too. But there are other things that sex touches that will just open your mind. Like you could have, a good sexual health practice with yourself or a partner. It's just fucking game changer. But I just think that, and again, doing this show and talking to people like you, it's like we're taught not to. We're also taught like, if you're a mom, see how I'm leaning into it? If you're a mom, like, oh, no, don't just be sexy, but don't talk about sex. Like, but don't be too sexy, but also don't wear orange on Thursdays because that's going to get the guy like, what the fuck? So I think, and if you're a dude, like we're kind of sick of you catcalling and whistling or whatever, but don't lose that fucking horniness. Just be quiet about it, which is like good because nobody wants to be catcalled or whatever. But you have this in today's world. They just did a fucking study where it's like Gen Z prefers less sex in movies. Fuck you guys. so like, oh, okay. Like, is that real, or are we just being told? Is that another piece of propaganda? And so I think we're in this world. You have these. You're brilliant at what you do. I'm sort of fumbling along interviewing brilliant people. And I keep coming back to this idea that sex is this great releaser, this great, like you said, liberator and an empowering thing for men and women. And if men could learn how to behave better and women would be allowed to fucking get their freak on a little bit more. Maybe if we swapped roles, in terms of how we act, things would be a lot better. End of rant. Now I'm turning it back over to you.
Wow, so many things. So many things there. I think one of the things that you're saying about moms, right? For example, moms being expected. It's interesting because the words sexy and mom, like unless you're a MILF, which is a subcategory and which is frowned upon by like other suburban moms and respectable men and whatnot. This is real. Other than that category, mom and sexy typically don't go together. You are supposed to be, what is the clip going around that all the children are very demure, very reserved, whatever the fuck. You are supposed to be sexy, but not overtly sexy. You're supposed to be desirable. You're supposed to be attractive. You're supposed to be fit. You're supposed to still have that little like gleam in your eye, but mostly you're supposed to be buttoned up and have on cardigans, and your ass should look really good in the mom jeans, but also wear loafers. And if you do fuck your husband and enjoy it, you definitely don't talk about it with your friends because what they're talking about is how much their husbands suck. This is, broad strokes, generalizations, but this happens a lot. This is common. But even what you're saying, all these other things are basically what all of the rant that you just went on, what all of that boils down to is what we've always been told and what we're still getting, even in 2024, which is amazing to me, is that sex is something that is performed. It's something that's not for everyone. It's something that doesn't belong to you. It's something that it's only okay within certain contexts and conditions and all these things. And only a very few people, probably mostly old white dudes, get to know what those are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of brilliant people out there who are fighting this, who are pushing back on that, who are educating, who are changing, there are paradigms shifting. We're grateful for all of that. And this is still going on, and it's interesting. I hadn't read the study or heard the study about Gen Z preferring less sex in movies. But what is interesting is that all of the sex that millennials were exposed to in movies and on television is all fucking incorrect. Like right. It's all unrealistic. It is all through the hetero white male gaze. It doesn't give a sense of how things actually work. It doesn't focus on female pleasure. It is not inclusive, and we're throwing around men and women, male and female. I am talking about all folks. There's so obviously when we're only talking about the binaries, we are losing a massive amount of individuals, right? So, and everyone is hurt by that. Everyone. We all miss out, because of that. And the thing that really that I'm a mom, bring out my Midwest, like I'm not even from here, but as soon as you said that, you're like, Mom, I'm a mom. And I have a 4.5-year-old daughter. And something that is very, it's implicit. And it's that when you become a mother, the parts of you that are not this kind of nourishing, wholesome, part that everyone, that everyone sees mothers as, or that everyone kind of, where I'm going with that.
Oh yeah.
If it's not that, you're supposed to file down those sharp edges. You're supposed to gloss over the parts that are a little wild and a little rough and, all these things. You're supposed to become palatable. Like it's your job to balance who you were before and who you were after through this kind of beige cardigan lens.
Oh.
And it sneaks up on you. Like I'm someone who, pre-motherhood, and spoiler alert, it didn't stop me, but pre-motherhood, very, I think people would describe me. There are people who are like, you're just sexual. I can't tell you how many times. If I had $1 for every time someone told me I was just sexual, I would be incredibly wealthy.
You're so horny, Christin. Oh my God.
So horny. It just, and they would say it with this gesture. I know we're on YouTube now. I just did an episode recently and I forget about being in front of the camera and I threw like peace signs and finger guns a couple times.
Finger gun away. As long as you don't simulate like an air hand job, which I can add, which I'll put a big censored over.
Okay, got it.
You just do you. Yeah.
Okay,
It's fine.
right.
Finger guns are great.
Okay. So, but there would be this hand when they said you're just sexual. There's this like, it's supposed to be all encompassing. And what I took that to mean is like, it's the essence of me, like at my essence. When I walk into a room, people are like, she just likes it dirty. She does, right? I've had that said to me, but also that's the look that comes on people's faces. There is, and they don't know what it is, right? They can't put their finger on it. They can't find the words for it. And what's so interesting is that I think I would have agreed with them when in my 20s. I would have been like, yeah, I'm a horny girl. Like I've got a high sex drive. I am into sex. I am, sensual. I'm in relationship with my body. I'm very aware of myself. I'm very aware of all these things. I'm aware of all of the archetypes that I very easily shift in and out of, and I'm happy to dress up and play those roles. Like I enjoy it. That's all good. But I think what gets missed in this conversation, this bigger conversation, and even goes back to what you're talking about, people who are cutting their experience with sex or sexuality off at like nutting and going to work, is that this all-encompassing energy that people are feeling or looking for or trying to emulate, it's life force energy. It's eros. Like it is the energy of creation. It is powerful shit. Like that's the thing that men and women and everyone, all non-binary royalty, that's what we all want. That's what we're attracted to. That's what we're looking for. But because there isn't the awareness or the education or the support or the language around this, we settle for sex. We settle for the idea of like the closest thing we can find to that, which is someone who is empowered in their sexuality. And so I think someone empowered in their sexuality, they've got a shoe in to this like channel, to this life force, creative energy channel. And that's what people are really drawn to.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think She Likes It Dirty is going to be the name of this episode because that's
Yes.
fucking, that's fucking,
Like
I
my
mean,
two fine finger runs again.
yeah, well, I mean, you do have that kind of energy, and I think that's fucking awesome. I have like the same thing. It's like, oh, this guy's a fucking nut, or whatever, and I'm like super proud of it. I'm not a parent, I'm not whatever, and I think that leads me right into my next question is, and you touched on it a little bit, but like, let's do a deep dive, right? Like, okay, you are someone who is sexual and horny and smart and knows herself well enough, knows what she likes, it maybe likes other things, isn't sure, whatever, but you're not afraid to go there. How do you enter this, like, soft boiled egg world of suburban motherhood as the girl who likes it dirty, right? Like, how do you maintain did you find yourself sort of like toning it down? Did you say, fuck that, I'm not doing it? Were there periods of sort of like just like doubt?
Yeah, there's yes. Now we'll go into it. Yes to everything. Yeah, I'm using Suburbia because basically I feel like I'm hopeful that people listening have had a similar experience, because truly no one prepared me for this. No one talks about this enough, where you go from, a hot, horny young couple, like living in the city, traveling the world, doing all these things. And then one day you have a tiny, perfect creature together and it needs more space. And so you're like, shit, need to start looking for a house in a yard where they're not going to get murdered or self-destruct or fall off of a balcony or whatever. And so you end up very organically somewhere in middle suburbia with a big yard and a house, and you can walk to the place that has good cookies, and like that feels really important. And yeah, you end up there and you're like, how did I end up here? It happens. So this happened to me. I ended up here, except for when I came here, I didn't know there's a dress code and there's a relationship standard and this is also a subculture. Suburban parenthood is a subculture also. And I didn't know that. And so I came in, off the streets, as it were, a mother, but like not buying into the whole, like, this is a lifestyle kind of thing. And it was interesting. It's hard without like witnesses on the stand to say factually from another person's experience. So I can only say what my experience was. But I tell the story about how when we moved into a neighborhood, not far from where we live now, it was our first winter there. And I looked out the window and I shit you not, there were 9 moms standing in like a circle, and they were all wearing the same coat, the exact same coat. Only one outlier. Hers was green, but it was the same brand. She was the ballsy one, and we're still friends. Hers was olive green, and everyone else's was black. It was the viral like Orly coat from Amazon.
Oh God, I thought you were saying like a Canada Goose or something.
No, it wasn't. But there's plenty of those too. Those were their own squad. This was an Orly squad.
Oh, okay.
So it was an Orly flock, and like I was like,
gang fights.
oh. Yeah. And I was like, I have a wine colored Calvin Klein. So like, this is going to be rough. That was my thought. So that was like such a visual of like, I just, in that moment, I had the feeling and the thought like, oh, what am I doing here? Like there was it felt like such a hard kind of assimilation. And I felt the old Christin was like, yeah, no, I'm getting a red jacket and I'm going to make sure I never buy that coat, even though it is fucking warm and I do really want one. I'm not. Yeah. Now I will never own one because of this. So I think very, very quickly I was feeling this is what you're supposed to do. This is how this looks when you reach this stage of life as being performed by 90% of people around me. And then the part of me that's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to wear those things and do that. And this is not in any way, I would like to make this very clear. This is not in any way a judgment of these other mothers or people who love the Orly coat or any of those things. but it did have me reflecting on how culturally there is an expectation of how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to behave, especially as a woman when you are entering this period in your life where you are having small kids and serving on the PTA and like doing all of these things. Like this is I know it's not just me, like it's in the water.
Yeah.
So I was very aware that I'm like, okay, I'm not quite willing to step into that, but I'm curious about it. People's reactions, I don't think it was as much about it is me, but it's also like, oh, our new neighbor is a sex coach, right? Like that immediately, lots of curiosity. The comments I got right away, oh, that's so interesting. I'm going to need to drink a lot of wine and ask you about that.
God.
So right there, like,
yeah.
This is not me making fun. Culturally, the fact that other women feel that they need to be drunk to ask me about my job because it centers on the word sex, this tells you where things still are. These are women, they're elder millennials. These are women who are in their 30s. Some of them have turned 40. And their experience is still like, this isn't something I can talk about on the sidewalk, like with my kids around.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, ooh, let me look and make sure everyone's busy before I like ask you a very general question about like how many clients you have or, you know, like,
Sure.
So there was, I could feel the curiosity and the desire to know more, but most people wouldn't ask me questions or reach out or engage me unless a lot of wine had been had.
Okay.
And so that was, it took a while. It took a while to kind of break through that and create a sense of like, I'm not here to steal your husband. I'm not here to get everybody doing anal, though if you want to, I've got all the points that you could possibly want. And guess what? A bunch of people do want to do that. They're just scared to like say it, not drunk and not around a bonfire. That's where a lot of these chats happen. And so it took a while for everyone to realize Christin is a very competent, wonderful mother. You know, they make fun of me for the fact that my child doesn't eat McDonald's. Like, talk about being an outcast. I do sex for work, but I won't let my kid have McDonald's when everybody else orders McDonald's. So like, yeah, I was just asking to be booted like from the beginning. So it was years of conscious effort to build safety in these relationships where the other women didn't feel judged by me. They didn't feel that they had to like perform or put on for me. They didn't feel that they had to, you know, like there was a weird feeling. And I don't know how many, because of the Midwest culture of just, you know, just kind of sweeping things under the rug. A lot of them are never going to be confrontational or cop to it, but it took 3 years to get to the point where someone was like, hey, I really want to know more about this. Like, will you tell me or help me? And I'm like, of course, like literally would have day one, but it felt like some kind of weakness, or it felt like you weren't allowed, or it felt like it exposed something vulnerable in your relationship that you're not supposed to talk about if you ask for help, or if you say that things aren't good. So it was confronting. Like it was interesting. And more to your, I don't know how good a job I'm doing. I'm very
great
podcasting. So in terms of like coming back full circle and actually answering a question instead of just going off on tangents, might be a 3 out of 10 on that right now, but
you do whatever you want. It's your episode. You know what I mean? And it's all valuable shit and we love it. So you go.
Thank you. I think that in terms of, you know, did that get on me? Like, did it influence me? I think it did in ways that I didn't even realize. Like, I was very conscious of not, you know, giving in to these certain things, of not conforming, of not like dulling myself down. But when I look back, you know, over the last few years, my presence on social media has changed a lot. And I think it's just a natural. It's like when your new neighbor friends' husbands start following you on Instagram and you have to see them every other day. Like, you know, your pics of your boobs and your ass and your empowered body spiel, like it gets less comfy. Like I'm a human being, guys. Like I still enjoy that. And that's two part. It's like, I've also deepened so many other areas of my life and interests. And I think this is a dilemma that I am with all the time, which is that my sexuality, my sexual expression, my sexual identity, this life force energy, this power, it is mine to do whatever the fuck I want with.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to put that energy into writing poetry, working with horses in the equine assisted training therapy program that I volunteer for, momming, writing a book, like, I get to do that. So just because I am this and this is a facet of me, I don't owe it to anyone, especially not the internet, to do this all the time. Mm-hmm. So there was very much a part of my departure from that kind of content that was me being like, yeah, I did this as kind of like a fuck you, purity culture in your face until it felt really good and people didn't have anything to say to me anymore. And then I was like, okay, now that this is no longer shocking to anyone, I'm going to go write poems and post a lot of videos of horses. And I started doing that. But there is that little part of me that can be honest about the fact that in addition to that shift, there was this part of me that's like, oh yeah, like I'm in this fishbowl where I'm constantly being looked at and I'm constantly being approached, on the weekends and having questions. And like, I don't want to make my friends uncomfortable. I don't want to, like when I know what their struggles are, when I know that there's stuff going on, when I know what, certain people are like, and, I don't want it to ever feel like I know that and I'm doing things that would make that feel harder or worse or uncomfortable or bring out insecurities. And that was something that snuck up on me. And so I think I haven't really thought about it in a conscious way, but I know there's a time coming where even with my daughter, I have a 4.5-year-old daughter who is getting to the point, she just calls shit out. She'll just say straight up, I was putting a grocery cart away and a guy came to like take it from me. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And she literally looked at me and she's like, why did your voice do that? And I was like, what? She's like, you said, oh my God, thank you so much. She like mocked me back, like right to my face. I was like, ooh, great question. Well, I'm a woman and a man is doing something nice for me. My voice goes 2 octaves higher to be like, oh, thank you so much for doing that. Like, I don't know. I was like, wow, I didn't realize I was doing it, but thank you for pointing it out. Now I'm going to go sit with it and really reflect on it. So it's not going to be easy for me is what I'm saying. So I think trying to get to this place where, what is the difference between making like watering yourself down, making yourself smaller, taking the edges off, becoming more palatable in order to stay safe, not lose belonging, kind of falling in line versus I have little eyes on me. Mm-hmm. And what do I want her to learn? Like, what do I want to embody for her? And how am I going to be educating her about how fucking complicated and nuanced that is?
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. And that's what I was going to ask you, when you were talking is, just how much you think you have been assimilated by the fucking the Borg, in suburbia, right? And two, with all the men like following you and and you're like, oh shit, I'm like posting like half naked photos and like talking about my body and my pussy and my orgasms and all these things. Like, do you get the feeling at the bonfire or just in general, right, that like some of the neighborhoods like just waiting for you to like have like a swinger event on a Saturday, or they're like waiting like in the group chat like, God, I really hope we get invited to or whatever. Like, do you get that vibe?
Hilarious. This is very funny because I think that first I'm going to say that all of my friends in the neighborhood, they know who they are, so I don't need to be all of my friends, people who are considered my friends. At this point in time, we understand each other very well, and we have built some really beautiful, supportive relationships. There are others outside of the friend group who, the way that I most experienced it is this, it's like subtle boundary breakdowns. And I'm sure that I know that people in other sex-related industries deal with this. But it's like, oh, because you put your tits on the internet sometimes and you talk about sex for your job. Right now it's Saturday and you are off the clock and I'm not paying you, but I feel like after 3 beers, when I feel less self-conscious, I can come right up to you and just start asking you shit about sex, about why my wife doesn't want to have sex with me, about all these things. And like, depending on my mood and what day it is, I'll either take the opportunity to educate or I might like just go in on them and be like, yeah, well, you know what I heard? I heard you did all this shit last week and you want to know why she doesn't want to have sex with you? That's why. You should try some of this stuff and maybe that would improve for you, buddy.
I could so see it too. That's amazing.
I'm like,
in the driveway.
Yeah, sometimes it's very, very educational.
Yeah.
And because listen, ultimately, I do what I do because I love it and I'm passionate about it. So like if a couple of drunk combos in the driveway is ensuring that people all around me are having better sex, I am here for that. Like I'm really here for that. But I do think that this idea of like, oh, I'm going to make the raunchy sex joke to Christin because she works in sex and she'll think it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, the guy
they're just shitty. Like, yeah, not a good joke.
The guy after like 4.5, fucking Bud Lights, like coming over and like, Christin, I can't get Rita to do anal. Like that's, come on, we don't need that. But those, I would imagine that happens like more often than not.
Yes, and that does happen. So there's that. In terms of, I think people already think that Mike and I are swingers, which is like, I think they murmur amongst themselves and they already think that we are. And I think they're terrified to be like landed on as like any of our perspective. I think they're all like, do not pick us. The ones, and it's not because they don't want to, it's because they haven't dealt with any of their internalized like biases and repressed desires yet. So they're really terrified of the idea of that. Everyone likes to joke about it. Everybody likes to, get rowdy and make up stories and whatever. But if it ever, I guarantee you that if it was ever like, all right, so
who's up?
You want to go? Whose house? I mean, the place would clear out in like 2 seconds. And then like never talk to them again.
Have you ever invited a couple or multiple couples over for dinner and you just get the vibe that they think it's going to be a fucking key party or a swinger party or something?
No, most of them will make the joke within 2 seconds of being in our house. They'll be like, this is a swingers party, right?
So how do you react to that?
And I'll just be like, only if you want it to be.
Depends on how much wine we have.
No, it's not. Yeah.
That's
I'll just be like, no, let me pour you some wine and give you some homemade pasta. And that is not a euphemism. I really perfected my pasta making over COVID. So
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is already like incredibly fascinating, and I love the dynamic of like this highly healthy sex, horny, woman who likes it dirty, not afraid to go there, lands in suburbia, right? This could be like, this is Netflix, and this has Netflix written all over it. So I know you're a writer. I mean, maybe get going on like a treatment for this, because this is dope. Yeah. It could be like that show You, except you're not killing people.
I'm not killing them. I'm seducing them.
Or just like educating them on sex, and then everybody turns into like a.
Everyone thinks I'm sleeping with the whole neighborhood, but really they're all just coming in to my office.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with their underlying traumas. I'm empowering them and giving them sex toys and sending them off.
Yeah.
With things like
right. And the whole neighborhood goes wild, and like the local politicians get involved.
Oh my God, of course. I'm banned. Christin is banned. From this tiny town in the middle of Illinois.
Yeah. No,
I want to add here that, me kind of riffing on and picking on like this dynamic and the neighborhood and all of these things. It's really like, this is more of it's a theme. Like, this is more about the theme, which is, I think, culturally, like, it just speaks to where so many of us still are, like, culturally and societally, in terms of there's so much curiosity, there's so much desire, there's so much like people want it, and there's fear and there's judgment and there's shame. And that's always been the conflict. And I think it's situations like this, like, they're funny, but they're just a bigger kind of external projection of these themes that we've been operating under like forever.
Yeah, it's almost a good metaphor for where everything is sexually in the culture and the zeitgeist, like, and where it's been, I don't know, forever, the last 150 years at least. And the, I don't know, since the 50s, at least it's like TV, but it's, and I just feel like, that they are funny stories and they are great. And I'm serious. You should totally pitch Netflix, but it is, of a larger conversation, which we come up, on the show all the time now. And I think it's really important. And I think a lot of people are going to resonate with this episode, and on that tip, I kind of want to push in more personally, and obviously, don't answer anything you don't want to answer. You already know that. Just say fuck off or pass or whatever words you choose. But okay, how long have you been married?
It'll be 8 years in November, and we've been together for 11.
Okay, together for 11, married for 8.
Yeah.
You said 4.5-year-old daughter. This is a lot of things that can be pressure, that can be beautiful yet difficult, time consuming. I mean, Jesus, yeah. Right? So how does someone who is such a sexual person, how do you keep it spicy? How do you teach him how to give you flashy blowjobs? What are we doing to keep things like hot and horny or whatever? Or was there a period of time where it just wasn't?
Yeah, dude. Yes, I will tell you the time that there wasn't, because people are always like, did you ever experience that? Yeah, I did, bitch. After I had a baby, and it actually was different than one might imagine. Mm-hmm. So that make it more annoying. I don't know. But let's just say that I'm someone with spontaneous desire, mm-hmm. Always have been. That persisted after I had a baby. When I had my daughter, I thought, it was such a wild experience, and the birth story is for another episode, but, unmedicated 24-hour labor, pulled her from my body with my own hands, put her on my chest. I thought I would sob, like I would cry when she came out, because I'm a very emotional, like I'm a crying baby. I love to cry. And I thought I would cry. And the first thing that I did, like clutched her to my chest, and I'm feeling all the things. And I laughed and I said, I'm not pregnant anymore. And
that's awesome.
It's because for someone who has been so embodied and who draws so much power and expression and safety from my body, having her inside of my body made me feel vulnerable in a way that I have never felt. The experience of being pregnant made me feel like a stranger in my own body, and it was heartbreaking, and it was often really sad and confusing. And there was so many things going on with this, like, this is necessary. I want this. I chose this. I'm so excited for her. Like it was such a both and experience. So when she came out and I could belly flop again, like there's nothing in the world that feels like flipping onto your stomach for the first time after giving birth, when you've had to like sleep on your side or propped up, all this stuff. So you don't like hurt the baby and all this. You couldn't sleep on your back and all kinds of crazy stuff. Also, you can't go front to front with anyone because there's this massive thing between you for like months and months and months. And so being able to just like have my body back was huge. And so very quickly, yes, there was hormones, there was blood, there was milk, there was organs rearranging, there was the whole 9 yards. And I was so intentional about reconnecting with myself, like as an individual, with my sexuality, with my self-practice, like my self-pleasure practice, like all of those things, got those back online as quickly as possible. But then there was the very real thing that happens where my partner, like, we had a new baby. Like we're tired, right? Like everybody's tired. He's stressed. There's lots of stuff going on. And so just the quality wasn't very good. The quantity definitely wasn't very good. Like we were on opposite schedules and it sucked. It sucked for a long time. Months and months and months, and I think it was probably around the 1 year mark where we made the agreement that we were going to focus on quality over quantity during this season, where like, if we're having sex, once a week, once a month, like once every two, whatever that actually breaks down to. We're not going to be as worried about that for right now. And we're just going to focus on when we are together, we're really together and we're really invested in figuring out what feels good now. What do we like now? What feels exciting? What feels nourishing? What feels connective? And that really supported us, because this idea that we were going to keep up with the sexual, schedule and prowess we had before we became parents was unrealistic. And we couldn't sustain it during that time, during that season. And so that was a huge piece, was quality over quantity. And we've maintained that. She's 4.5 now. She sleeps through the night. She's in her own room. For the most part, our biggest thing is like, don't wake her up. You can't be so loud. That the ass slapping and the screaming cannot be so loud that she gets woken up. Like, that's not okay. So other than that, though, I think one thing that's really supported us, we were laughing about it this weekend, is we have a very unorthodox setup in terms of like, he works out of the state half the week. So he's not in my bed 2-3 nights a week, every week. And while that messes with like frequency, come back to the quality of the banging is really high right now, because we miss each other. Mm-hmm. We're not together physically. And so I think that, on top of being open and curious, we've had lots of uncomfy conversations over a decade, coming to each other and saying, hey, I'm so bored. Like, I love you and I'm in it for the long haul and I'm so bored, I want to die. And being like, wow, maybe we could have said that nicer, but also let's look at like what is underneath of this. And so being able to hear stuff like that from each other, being able to ask honest questions and sit with whatever the answer is, even if it makes us feel alarmed or scared, or makes us wonder where our future is heading because it's new and it's different and it's unfamiliar. Being able to trust that we're going to figure it out no matter what comes. And that is what has served us the most. It's coming right back to what I said at the beginning. Mm-hmm. The conditions for incredible sex is safety. You have to feel safe in your body, in your relationship. And we have a lot of safety. We spend a lot of time. We go to therapy. We do things to support and invest in the relationship so that our relationship can withstand all types of evolution. And there's been a lot of evolution in our relationship over the years.
Yeah. No, I think, and there's a ton of like an insanely valuable, gorgeous information in there for people who are watching or listening. And I love that because, as we talked about, like, if this show is not a tightrope walk between like horniness and chaos and value and, oh my God, I should try that, then I have failed as a host. And you make it so easy because we're hitting all of the marks, and it's natural, and you're incredibly gifted in how you go about the things that you want to communicate. And so I appreciate that. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of everything, because there, a lot of people are in, maybe not even married, like they're in relationships that are long-term, that they're struggling with sex and whatever. And this brings me to my next thing, and we're getting towards the end, but I want to make sure I give you enough time, because I feel like a lot of women will identify with this. And I think you'll have a lot of fun, horny things to say, but also like a lot of valuable things to say. And again, only say what you want, but you are in a straight facing heterosexual relationship, and yet you are bisexual, right? So, and you haven't really talked about it at length. So I want to give you as much time as you want, but like, what does that mean, right? Just for people who are like, how does that work? Whatever. The guy after 4 Bud Lights wants to know, right? And also, what does that feel like? Is it exciting, scary, whatever? How are you feeding your bisexual self, right? So I'll let you have the mic.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
I want to preface this portion of the conversation by saying that sexuality is a spectrum. I've always said that. I've always believed that. The more data that comes out, the more research that's done as we take apart these binaries that are based in, religious Western patriarchal bullshit, we're starting to realize the truth of that. And it's something that I have inherently always known. And it's something that I think I've embodied for a long time, long before I actually had the language and the safety to ascribe a label to myself, to claim the label like bisexual for myself. I grew up, little Christin origin story. I grew up in North Carolina, in the 90s, during purity culture. And there was, think about all those things together. I had never heard of bisexuality until I was in my 20s. Like, that's straight up. I had a friend come out to me when I was maybe 12 or 13. I had gotten into theater a little bit, and that's where we can always find our gays. And I love that. But up until then, I didn't know any queer people. I didn't have any examples of what that looked like. And funnily enough, the way that gender bias and all this stuff works is the only queer I did know about was gay men. I actually didn't know that women could also be queer, right? You think about how fucked up the stacking of those things can be. Mm-hmm. So I did not have the language for the experiences I was having. Now I can look back and I can recognize that I had crushes on girls and boys starting at 11, 12. The intense, excited, flustered, hot in the face feelings that I had, for, I'm not going to name anyone, it's a really small town, but for the boy that I was really into in middle school or high school or whatever, I thought those same feelings, the same feelings that I had for the girl that my brother had a crush on, I would have dreams about her, and I would wake up and pray those dreams away because that was not okay. I felt so disturbed, and there was this deep sense of something is wrong with me that I'm having those kinds of dreams about her. But if I'd had that dream about what's his butt, it would have been fine. And I didn't, because I didn't have this language, these strong feelings that I felt for girls were very am I jealous of her? Do I want to be her? Do I, am I in competition with her? There was nothing for me to go to other than I guess that friction, that heat I feel is some kind of weird competition thing, which is tragic. Right. But mm-hmm. that's what I was working with. So then I got to, I finally moved away from North Carolina, moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and start exploring everything, 20 to 30, most formative decade of my life, there in Nashville. And it was so interesting to me that not only did I go on what I think I referenced in our first conversation, my sexual liberation tour, because I was definitely, I am out of here. I'm out of the church. I'm out of purity culture. I'm not doing any of that. So I had lots of empowered, consensual, wild, fun, exploratory sex with men. And that was wonderful and felt great about that. And then in the meantime, I was making out with beautiful women in clubs and bars and on dares all the time. And I was just yeah, this is just everybody does this. Everyone does that, right? And there are plenty, to be fair, plenty of straight women who do that. Plenty of people who do that. But for me, there was this real consistent attraction that I still didn't know how to quantify, with myself. And I laugh to this day thinking about this story I was telling you about earlier, where I was actually out with, my now husband, Mike, who I met when I was 23. I think I realized that I was bisexual potentially right around the time I was 23. And I met the guy who would end up being my husband. We got serious, pretty quickly, would start going out. And he, I remember being out one night at a bar. We were meeting a friend of his, and his friend was bringing his new girlfriend, and we were going to come, we were coming to meet him and his new girlfriend. And so we're waiting for him to get there. we're all hanging out at the bar, me and Mike get a drink, and he's like, I forget how he phrased it. Something like, I bet that you couldn't get whatever. I think I said something sassy, like, I could get any girl in this place to like kiss me, and you can pick the girl. And he was like, which if I did start that, everybody like, really, she's not bi. Okay. I was like, I can kiss any chick in here. You pick the one. So he points to this stunning, probably 5'11", 6 foot brunette goddess across the way, dancing, having a good time, surrounded by friends. And I was like, oh, it is on. Like, hold my drink. So I gave him my drink, walked over to her, and listen, it's easy. Like, I'm sorry. It's easy. It doesn't matter. I walked up to her and I was literally like, oh my God, you are so pretty. Your hair is incredible. And like, how would you feel about me laying one on you right now? And she was like, oh my God, would you? And she gave her drink to her friend. She's like, here, take this. And I kissed this gorgeous woman. Still think about this kiss to this day. And 2 seconds later, Mike comes up, and the friend we were waiting on comes over, and he's like, oh, good, you guys met. This is my new girlfriend. And introduced me to the woman I had just made out with in front of everyone at Bastion. And it was so funny. Like, but that kind of thing, Mike used to joke. He's like, every time she saw you after that, there was like an exchange, like an energetic, like, she's thinking about the kiss that you had. And so it was like there were all these little moments that added up to me really realizing, like, this isn't, like so many people think, this isn't a phase. This isn't me being horny and literally being attracted to everyone on earth, because that's not true. Mm-hmm. This is part of who I am. Like, this is part of me as a person. And it wasn't safe for me to express that until now, right? Or until then. And even then, I was doing it without the label or the umbrella, because that I didn't know for one, and two, like, I imagine that would have felt really dangerous as well, because we've come a really long way in terms of being accepting of queer, people mm-hmm. in our community. But still, like 2010, 2011 in Nashville, Tennessee, like, still not the most queer friendly place, right? Yeah. So it's been this evolution. And I think that was something that I couldn't really try on until much later. I had these experiences, I had this felt sense, but it wasn't until probably 5 or so years ago that I started really sitting with, like, oh, this label, like, the more I learn about this, the more I learn about the umbrella of bisexuality, the more I learn about queerness, like, this is me. This is like who I am. I'm a part of this. And it was something that I felt so conflicted about, in terms of nothing in my life. And this is massive privilege. And that felt very heavy. I'm very privileged. Nothing in my life ultimately will change that much if I come out. If I say, hey, world, I'm queer, I'm bisexual, I'm white, I'm American, I'm blonde, I'm pretty, like, I'm married to a man, I drive a white Volvo, like, nothing's going to happen. Some of my family members, some of Mike's family members, they're going to be uncomfy. They're going to talk about it behind my back. They're going to send a couple texts. They might have a few glasses of wine and then ask me some questions, but other than that, like, my business is not going to suffer. I'm not going to be ostracized from my community. Some of the gems here might stop speaking to me, but like, really that, I might be avoided, but ultimately, like, nothing I haven't already endured for, like, being a woman, for sometimes being overtly sexual, for being outspoken, for being unpalatable in other ways, like, nothing changes that much. And I think I felt a sense of, well, like, who am I to claim this or take up space here when there are so many people who to do this is dangerous, or it's a sacrifice, right? Yeah. And so it's been a process of personal, like, education. Anyone who's listening, like, I want you to know that this is something that I'm currently, like, this is fresh. I'm not speaking to you from the other side, or, I'm still in this, figuring out what it looks like and what it means to honor my queerness in a straight facing relationship with a partner who, by the way, is affirming, who is supportive, who loves me implicitly, who we have talked about, his fears that are very valid and normal around this. We've talked about the future. We've talked about, all of the things that come up with these kind of later discoveries. And that has been in and of itself so healing and so powerful, because he is ultimately the guy that I have always been with. Like, he's the guy who was like, whoever, like, this is the Christin ride and I'm on it. Like, I don't care like who you end up being, because I've changed so many times in big and small ways over the 11 years that we've been together. And this is just a deeper integration, or a deeper, more intimate homecoming, really, to like who I've always been. And I think it's the safety of our relationship that has actually allowed me to explore this part of myself. This might have never come about. I may have never come into relationship with this part of myself had it not been for how safe my partner is. And that hasn't been easy. I'm not saying that that's been easy, but like, it has been life-changing. But the questions like that I still don't have answers to, the questions are, what does it look like to honor my queerness within the boundaries in our relationship that we agree on together, that we talk about often and that evolve always? What does it look like to model and normalize this in our family, which looks very traditional on the outside, but we have a little girl and I want her to know that it's okay it's more than okay. It is amazing to be queer. It's normal to be queer. Like, it's accepted and it's wonderful, and love is love, and anybody she wants to bring home is going to be welcome and celebrated. And we're going to like tee-hee and pick on her no matter who it is, who they are, how they express. And I think we're doing okay. She's so far had 2 weddings, one to a girl named Aria and one to a boy named Ethan. So I feel like we're doing okay.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that I'm modeling, I want to model this and normalize this for her. I don't want it to be something that feels like it isn't spoken about. I don't want to sit comfy in my privilege and not share this part of me with her when I'm out here telling her that like, it's okay for her to be whoever she is, and she's going to be that, and I'm going to love that, and I'm going to support that. And how is she supposed to believe that if I'm not doing that myself?
Yeah.
So we're at a place in time where I feel like it's more important than ever. I've never spoken about this publicly. I mean, my big line is like, I'm not out, and I started dropping this into conversation with friends and people who felt really safe to me over the last couple of years. I mean, I think the sweetest thing anyone could say is what one of my really dear friends, Nicole, said to me. And she said, she's like, I don't think you've ever explicitly told me that, but I've always known that about you.
Right.
And I feel like that felt really powerful, to be seen in that way. And that's different than someone being like, are you sure you're bi? I'm pretty sure you're just horny. Like, I'm pretty sure you're just sexual again, right? Like, you're into everybody, you're into everything. And that is true. And that's a really big misconception. And I'm educating myself on what bisexuality is like. Bi erasure is very real. Like, I'm not a bad lesbian. I'm not a bad straight person. I'm not half gay and half straight. Like, it's its own thing.
Right.
And I also want people to know, like, you don't have to have acted on your attraction to be valid in your queerness. Like, you might not be seeing women or sleeping with women or men or, however that looks for you for it to be true.
Right.
And so there's a lot here, but
no. And that's where I was going to jump in at the end here is you, and you just nailed it. I was going to ask, like, have you pushed into, being sexual with a woman solo? Is it more of like, oh, maybe we should do threesomes or whatever? But, I didn't know how far you had gone yet, or maybe you're just in the discussion phase and trying to figure that out. So that was going to be my final question to you. You just nailed it,
So we've been in discussion for a while, and something that my husband and I already had in place was this. I think we've talked about before, was our kind of like our flirting clause. Like, we think this goes back to the things that keep it spicy and that keep the attraction going and the polarity and the fire burning in the hearth and all that good stuff. And that is that, like, we like to play with our erotic energy. Like, you know how it feels. You're like having a bad day and you go out and a stranger is like, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you are a dime piece. Like, you are the hottest person I've ever seen. And you walk out like 3 inches taller and you feel so good, right? That somebody recognized that in you, that somebody called out to that part of you that was maybe lying dormant until they saw you. It feels good. And so we've always had this agreement that we can flirt, when we're out together or even separate. Flirting is fine. If someone comes up and approaches you and they're like, hey, what's going on? And they want to buy you a drink and have a conversation, that is totally a-okay with both of us. We're fine with that. We have boundaries in place around that. We have, very specific guidelines in terms of, we never take phone numbers, for example. We never give the other person the impression that this is going to go any further than it is. The flirting and the banter is fine. The drink is fine. But it's like, at the end of the night, I'm going home like that without you. And that's explicit. And so we have always played with that. And so we've had conversations where basically now that has just extended to, like, I would never make out with another man. That's not part of our agreement. It might be part of other people's, and that's wonderful. In our current agreement, that is not part of the agreement. We don't make out with these people. We don't physically get involved with them in any way. However, we have talked about how if I am out and I meet a beautiful woman and the drinks are flowing and things are sparkly and I want to make out with a beautiful woman, that's okay with us. That is okay for, that is okay with him. He doesn't need to be present. He does want to know about it. He'd like to be told about it. Not even an explicit detail, but like, yeah, I met someone, got flirty, we made out. And that's what feels good for us right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have talked about threesomes many times. The thing that's hilarious is that when we met and we were in our 20s, like early 20s, him as an early 20-year-old dude was obsessed with having threesomes. And I was like, nah, I will cut a bitch, because I didn't know how to tolerate jealousy and I didn't know what I was doing. And thank God, I've like grown and learned so many things. Also, maybe there was parts of me that was like, ooh, some stuff about me that I'm not ready to look at yet might come out. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. So there was a lot of resistance about it then. And now I'm like, you want to have threesome? And he's like, God, I don't know if I can handle it,
That's amazing. It's so amazing.
The roles have turned. He's like, it's all different now. I'm like, I know, because it's not all about you and male gaze now. So that's interesting.
That's incredible.
But I think what's so important, and I'm sure plenty of people will listen to this and be freaked out. And then there's plenty of people who will be like, oh, you know what? That makes a strange kind of sense. And whatever it is you're thinking, listening to this conversation is actually none of my business. What I love is that there's so much safety to be curious, to admit that there is desire, that there is curiosity, that there is possibility. And also there's respect. There's mutual respect. We have agreed to do life together. Like, we keep renewing the agreement every year. Like, we have a child together. We are committed. We are building something bigger than ourselves. I'm not going to run off and leave him without so many conversations. Right. And I think that is a very natural fear of someone who is straight, who is with someone queer, is like, what if I'm not enough, is the fear.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Right. Like, what if I'm not enough for you? And I'm like, dude, I could have picked anyone. Right. And I picked you. And one of the big reasons I did that is because he has always been someone who holds and loves me with open hands.
Yeah.
And that has been the catalyst and the foundation of our relationship. And I trust that that will continue, like, no matter where this goes and where it evolves. And that's where we're at right now.
Love it. Christin Henke, thanks so much for being on Sex Party again. It was honestly like a treat to have you back on. I want to do this again sooner rather than later.
Let's not wait 3 years next time.
Yeah, no.
That's on me. That's to me. It
Well,
will not be 3 years.
Okay, yeah. You guys all heard it. She'll be back sooner than later. Let's remind them where they can find you, where they can work with you, all the things.
Yes, if you would like to follow my poetry and my horses, you can follow me on Instagram at Christin.Henke. I do have a website, but it's not really working. You can have my email because I'm old school, elder millennial. You can email me, Christin at christinhenke.com if you are interested in working together, in exploring your own embodied safety, and exploring your sexuality, and exploring sexual and religious trauma, all of the above. I'm equipped to support you. So yeah, I'm here.
Amazing. Guys, go work with her. We'll link everything. Thank you so much for being on the show again. And yeah, we're going to do this sooner than later.
Dustin, I so appreciate you. Thank you for just, we were talking before we hit record, and like you have become such a genuine friend, and that's not something that always happens, you know, in exchanges. Like they can be very like quick and dirty, and you know, no one gets anything lasting out of it. But really, I feel just very grateful for the friendship that we've developed since you reached out to me about being on the podcast. Ago. And
I feel the same exact way about you. So yeah, it means a lot. It means a lot. Totally.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Awesome. Talk soon.
Okay.
Big thank you to my guest, Christin Henke, for coming back to Sex Party, recording another episode with me. It's always a pleasure to have her. She is awesome. Go check out her on Instagram, buy whatever courses she's selling, work with her. She is incredible. She will be back. If you guys are loving guests like Christin, you want to see her again, you want to see guests like her, but mainly you really just want to show Sex Party some love, some devotion, some appreciation. How can you do that? Well, if you're listening to this on platforms like Apple and Spotify, you could leave a rating, you could leave a review, but honestly, fuck all that noise. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you're subscribed to the show so you never miss a new episode every single Wednesday. Click subscribe, especially if you are subscribed or you think you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts. They're doing this thing. They're unsubscribing people from shows. I don't know what's going on. We're trying to work it out. So this is what you want to do. Go to Apple Podcasts. Go to Sex Party with Dustin Rybka. Upper right-hand corner, there's a button there. If there's a pause symbol or something, click that. Drop down menu will appear. Click resume downloads, resume subscription, whatever. Bingo, bang, boom. You're re-subscribed. If you're watching on YouTube, I love you. I see you. I appreciate you. If you're watching on YouTube and you're a mother, have you ever felt like you're the odd man out because you're the horny sexual person and everybody else is just boring? Let me know in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, what can you do to make sure you never miss a new episode of this show every single Wednesday? You know what I'm going to say already, right? You could leave comments. I love interacting with you. You could like all the videos. I appreciate that so much. But what you want to make sure you do absolutely is subscribe to this channel so you never miss a brand new episode. I'm always available in the DMs, and I will see you all right back here next week.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin at Dustin Rybka.